The city of Joburg has been experiencing increasing water outages recently. Among other things, this is due to the failure of infrastructure to keep up with the growing population, the aging pipes and systems which have not been maintained, as well as illegal connections. Let's look at this crisis the city is experiencing as Rand Water undergoes maintenance. I'm joined by Benoit Leroy, South African Water Chamber CEO. A very good afternoon to you, and thanks very much for your time. I mean, for many people who have been complaining about the fact that the infrastructure is not being maintained, this is a welcome intervention, isn't it?
Yes, hi everyone, to the viewers in a hot summer's day. Look, the news is welcome. It's inconvenient, but it's inconvenient because the system is vulnerable. We've always had these type of interventions, upgrades, etc., because the system is very vulnerable to not only high temperatures, to growing population, but it's vulnerable to interruptions, which it shouldn't be, because we don't have 2 days of storage in the system. I think today the CEO of Joburg Water was saying they've got about 1,000 megaliters, which is it's just over half of a daily consumption of 1,750 to 1,800 megaliters. So you should have 2 days, 48 hours. So we should have about 4,000 megaliters of, and that's million liters of storage. And then these interruptions that we've always had in the past wouldn't be felt as they're felt now. But we have to welcome the interventions, and at least it's getting attention, and I think there's no escaping that the work has to be done now.
But of course, I mean, there are other groupings like your Citizen Water Advocacy Network, Water Can, who believe that as much as the intervention should be welcome, they are questioning the timing of the shutdown coming as it does on the first a big long weekend of December, which is typically a very busy one.
Well, generally speaking, the water demand goes right down. From the 16th or thereabouts, the water consumption goes down because businesses, industry do shut. And we do have warmish weather, although it is a bit warmer than normal, but every year is getting warmer. And, we could wait, Rand Water could wait till July, but there would be more outages and more vulnerability introduced to the system. So, it needs to be done. And, I think we need to also understand that these systems are extremely complex. And, it's not up to society to understand the complexities, etc. But, the disruptions and the discomfort we're feeling, we shouldn't be if the City of Johannesburg, I'm not saying Joburg Water, the City of Johannesburg had invested over the last 30 years, as it should, 2% of its infrastructure, which is 2 billion rand. And it hasn't done that. And this is the catch-up that's been happening. And also Rand Water is also having to gear up its capacity, both from a treatment, abstraction treatment, so the chemical treatment they do down in the Vaal Dam, and then also its booster pump stations, its networks. It has to increase that for 2028 when the volumes will increase with the Lesotho Highlands Phase 2 project coming online, which is 10 years late. So everything's late, we're playing catch up, the system is vulnerable, but there's no getting away. We have to do this work. So, as an engineer, I unfortunately cannot understand the requirement to delay and postpone and cause more havoc in the system later.
But
that's really not what we want from that perspective.
But just how complicated is what is about to be done? Just the practicalities of it all. I heard someone talking about how this exercise is completely different to what an ESCOM, for example, would have to do if it was to undergo this kind of maintenance.
So electricity is very straightforward. It's on-off, it's electrons. Water is very different, very complex. The system, firstly, is unlike a power line. The system, bulk and distribution, has to be wet all the time. So as soon as you decrease the pressure, you get air ingress, etc., the system has to be bled. And then the system also Once you finish the work, and it has to be dry, once it's finished the work, you have to then refill it, and you have to purge the air, otherwise you start destroying the pipework, etc. So electricity can switch off and make safe and work. You cannot do that with water. So water is a very slow process to, in actual fact, get to the work to be done. And generally speaking, the work is either way below ground or high above ground. It's generally speaking quite a dangerous work that has to be properly controlled. And Rand Water are busy with a 38 billion Rand program. And most of that program is actually for Gauteng. So Joburg, yes, is 27 billion down on their delivery system, their distribution system. But these are also underground, etc. So, the Eskom work, I've never heard anybody try to compare electricity to water. They're just two very different. The Eskom work is on the power stations, is chemical plants that are fairly easy to access. The distribution system is above ground. Water is generally speaking below ground. So they're quite complex. So us in the water sector, I work in water, waste, and energy. We see electricity as the easiest, then we see waste, and then we see water as the most complex. So but as citizens, we shouldn't have to worry about these things. We want water out of our tap, at the right price, the right volume, pressure, and quality. But everybody's sensitized to the system now because it's always going down. Unfortunately, this is going to carry on for another decade. That's the reality. If you don't look after your car for 30 years, believe me, it will break down in every corner. And then the intervention the tankering system is just unable to cater for this. Generally speaking, we had outages before, and you wouldn't feel it because we had 2-day storage. The population is 300% more in Gauteng than it was 30, 40 years ago. And, the system is it's at the end of its wits, and it doesn't take much to actually push it over. So every intervention that we're going to feel it, and it's unfortunate, but I think what we've got to do is share, and I think there's a drive to try and share as much information as possible as opposed to holding back. So there is a Gauteng dashboard, there's an eThekwini dashboard to try and show the high-level summaries, of what's happening. And also what we've got to do is depoliticize this all, because, basic services shouldn't be in the political realm. It should be run as a utility, and the politics should come and go and change and do what they do, but this has to carry on. But due to politics, we haven't invested. And the utility can only invest in what it is given by the Joburg City Council in this case. And it didn't give the money.
So we shouldn't really worry about what's going to happen this weekend, the water outages for maintenance. But should we worry, to use your word, about the fact that the Department of Water and Sanitation's latest report says there's been a significant decline in the Vaal Dam's water capacity levels, and that dam, of course, being a powerhouse of South Africa's economy?
So it's one of 14 dams in the integrated Vaal River system. So we should be concerned. I don't think we should be worried. We had this 7 years ago, and we released, around about 7 or 8 years ago, we released water from Sterkfontein. And so we're still above 20. When we hit 18% of Vaal Dam, we don't do it before because Vaal Dam is very shallow. When it's hot like this, most of the water is evaporated and not put into the potable water system. But Sterkfontein Dam is always kept over 90% and has about the same volume as the Vaal Dam. They don't release the entire volume, and that water is imported from the Tugela system. So a kilometer over the Drakensberg. So it's quite a sophisticated system. It's the second biggest interbasin transfer in the world. It was until 2010, the biggest. So we need electricity. Luckily, we've got that for that to work at the moment. And we'll be releasing that water we think around about Christmas or New Year. And it takes a week or so, or 10 days to get from the Drakensberg down to the Vaal Dam to top it up. So we shouldn't be worried. And that we've got enough water in there for roughly a year. But in March, end of March, we'll be finished with the work in Lesotho, Highlands Phase 1, and that maintenance work will then allow more water to come into the system. So I don't think we should be concerned. Everything is a little bit too, uncomfortable, but I must just say there's an economic multiplier in all of this. So for every 10 billion Rand that's spent, there's about 40 billion Rand of economic activity that goes into our economy. So one must look at that side of it too. So in the discomfort and trying to plan around it, there's some economic opportunities that we direly need. So it's not as if the money is sunk into the system and there's no effect apart from water security eventually. There's also economic multipliers in the system. So that's the flip side of it. And industry, hospitals, and the like, generally speaking, have 2, 3, 4, some up to 5 days of water storage. And some of the bylaws you'll see in some of the cities are that hospitals, clinics have to have a certain amount of volume available. Generally speaking, shopping centers have it for firefighting, for example, too. So one has to start planning and investing in their own water security, to an extent. But if everybody puts storage, then we're also going to have too much drawing on the system at the moment. So this is a slow onset crisis that's come in, and it's going to be slow to sort it out because we just can't do it big bang. And that's the frustrating part of it, and society and industry feel that.
But doesn't that then underscore the importance of consultations, of planning ahead, so that people, consumers of water, but shopping centers you mentioned and other people can plan properly, knowing way ahead of time when and for how long these kinds of interventions will happen?
Yes, so we knew about this about a month ago, this particular one. And generally speaking, the communication we've seen has been upped quite well. So it's done in a direct manner. It's done on social media, in the main media. So generally speaking, the correspondence is quite well done. The Gauteng dashboard has part of the events being recorded, but also what's going to happen. So I think that, with social media, we have the ability of being able to be informed, quite well in advance. But also it's a flip side, as industry, we must also be asking for when on the next interruption shutdown, what is the plan for the next year that we think it is. And, there are forums that are set up and more being set up to be able to do the dialogue, because sticking to the legal minimum is also not necessarily, adequate also. We need to improve that. And I'm quite sure if you look into Rand Water and to Joburg Water, you'll see they've got a plan for the next 4 to 5 years. And then you've got unplanned stuff we've got to cater, but there's a plan going ahead, and those plans need to be shared. We haven't in this country been used to sharing plans. So if you look at Cape Town, we know what they're going to do for the next 10 to 20 years from a broad perspective. And then there's a detail that has to be communicated. So that game has to be upped, definitely has to be upped.
Is that plan well financed as far as you can tell? Because remember, the city has not met its targets over the past 10 years, and a big part of the problem, we've been told by some people, is the fact that the infrastructure program is not as well or optimally financed.
Yeah, so when the master plan, the water sanitation master plan was published in 2018, it was about 90 to 100 billion a year, starting in 2010 to 2030. We only started this year. And 2/3 of it was funded. Right now, we believe the program's over 1.5 trillion, and it looks like around about 1/3 is maybe funded. So 2/3 has to come from other sources, development finance institutions and the private sector. So generally speaking, Rand Water and Mgani, they are self-funding. They're not funded from the fiscus, and they're generally able to raise bonds in the markets, etc. The City of Johannesburg is completely privately funded, but Johannesburg is largely unfunded and in debt of, I think, around about 49 or 50 billion. So there's quite an issue on the funding, and this is why reaching out to the private sector it's a difficult one, because there are terms and conditions. People won't put their pensions and their savings and private equity into the current structures. It has to change, and the money has to be guaranteed, and we can't get sovereign guarantees anymore in South Africa. So these other mechanisms being investigated. The reality is it hasn't started. So Rand Water is able to do its work, but the cities, apart from Cape Town, that's fairly well funded too. It's raised a green bond that was oversubscribed, but City of Joburg is largely unfunded, and that's part of the issue, is to be able to adapt policy, terms and conditions, supply chain management into such a manner that is conducive to the private sector, investing. So a lot of work is being done in that, and it's a very difficult one because it's going into the public fiscus, and we have a very bad reputation with sticky fingers in our country. So and the more regulations you put in to avoid the corruption and bribery, etc., the more time it takes because it's very complicated. And our system is very, very complicated. We have to simplify it and make it an honest system so that we can expedite. So us, it takes 2 to 4 years to start a PPP, public-private partnership. The rest of the world is 3 to 6 months. So we have to simplify things, and we have to bring in, a high degree of honesty so that investors are comfortable with the investments, because these things are really 10 to 20-year programs where investors fund, generally speaking, through bonds and get reasonable yields. The yields in South Africa are quite good, so they're attractive from that perspective. It's just the credit worthiness of our metros outside of Cape Town are rather low at the moment. So that needs to be worked on. eThekwini doesn't have a credit rating, I'm told, and I believe that needs to be fixed also. They're also looking for 40, 50 billion rand.
So we're going to leave it for today. Thank you very much for your time. That conversation, of course, taking place ahead of the water cuts for about 86 hours as Rand Water performs maintenance in Johannesburg, including areas like Soweto and Randburg.